Hello everybody. As this is my first video of 2021, I just wanted to pop on here quickly and say a huge thank you for all of the support and subscribes and likes and comments that you've been making over the last months. I only started regularly producing videos in the first lockdown in the UK here last March. And in that time it's grown from a handful to near enough 500 followers, which is, or subscribers I should say, with I think it's something like 37,000 minutes watched since in those last few months. So a huge thank you to you. I really do appreciate the support and the subscribes. If you're not already subscribed, please do so. It really helps me and it's free. That would be really appreciated. And what I want to do now in 2021 is to continue very much with these videos, but instead of just sharing my sketchbook work, my work out on location, I very much want to sort of balance that with work in the studio. This year I'm going to be producing a big body of work that is continued from my explorations last year, all about the landscape that surrounds me here, and I'm going to be sharing very much warts and all here so that you can see the process and see how it develops, and I just hope that will be of interest to you all. And without further ado, what I want to do now is to lead into this video. And this is the finished concertina sketchbook, and at the end of last year I showed you a couple of videos, one of which was me pre-preparing the sketchbook with some collage and inks. And then subsequently I shared with you some snippets of me out in the landscape working over that pre-prepared background using mark making approaches. And so here is the finished concertina. And I just wish everybody a better 2021. So this is how I call a page. So I did them as double page spreads because that enabled me to have enough paper to work with really, and I quite like working square, and I do a lot of my painting square, so it kind of made sense for me to do double pages at a time. So this was the first one, and what is really quite interesting is that you get these lovely sort of serendipitous effects of the background that's already there that you've created by creating that sort of background start point, and there's text here and others, different sorts of text and marks and so on. And then I worked over that, and there was stone walling, and there were wires, and there were plants, hence the orange, and I used a combination of marks that denoted the shapes and the lines that I was seeing really in the landscape. So I used compressed charcoal, the brown is art graft, I also used some Inktense pencils. And the other thing I kind of paid attention to a point was the kind of connection to the next page, whether I wanted it to kind of continue on or how I wanted it to be. So this here I've been quite loose about it, but I have kind of extended the line. So the join is there, and you can kind of almost sort of get a connection, but it's not, you know, a sort of an obvious. I didn't continue the line, for example, but I think the connection is already there because of the fact that the background paper kind of went over it anyway. So, and then this, and I'll fold it so you don't get confused, but here's the next page spread, and this is a different location. I was particularly interested in all of the lines and marks in the landscape. I used a combination of techniques here. I was using blind contour, I was using my non-dominant hand, just to get a kind of a take on the marks that I was seeing in the landscape. And so line work was a bit of a focus. Again, stronger marks to contrast. And I started feeling quite compelled, even though it's a sort of essentially black and white apart from the green, I started to feel quite compelled to put the green in, because that was the thing that was noticeable actually, that are quite muted colours but quite bright grass pasture in the fields, and so that was what that was kind of referencing and reflecting really. And here again I have used compressed charcoal. I've wetted some of it and sprayed it to get a looseness. I've also knocked some of it back. If you remember how busy these pieces were before I even started working over, in some cases I worked some white paint and gesso before I went out, and in other cases I actually added the white afterwards to simplify and to make it easier to understand and read, really. And so this is what this white here is. So that's the next one. And then this was done on the same occasion, this one. So I did this and this on the same occasion. And interestingly, hopefully, you can see I've kind of just continued the wiggles over, but it's quite a different scene. I've used quite a lot of white to knot things back. I've added white actually to make the patterning simpler. So I've tried to kind of do different things. On some occasion, I've gone with the kind of murkiness between lines and marks. On other occasions, I've blanked it out so that the edge lines become more sort of dominant. Hopefully you can see that there. So let me fold it so you can just see this one. So this one, again, more green. This one, I was looking into the distance. I had wires and big fence posts and some walling and other lines in the landscape, including telegraph poles and edges of fields, because it was quite a big scene. So hopefully you can see how loose it is, but how you can simplify. And again, I've used white to kind of knock things back a little bit, really. And then this was on a different occasion. So you can see how those marks were still on that edge bit there, and they've kind of continued in. Now this is a different scene, and it's trees coming out of walling. And so a little bit more messy. I've kept this one purposely more messy. I quite like the tangled messiness of it. And that's a birch tree that's growing, but I didn't want it to be kind of too literal. So that's a birch tree growing out of the wall. And there were lots of different marks and lines going on. And I could potentially simplify this a bit more, but I quite liked it. And I used art graft that was a brown art graft, which is what you can see here. The twiggy branches and where I've put darker lines. And again, I quite like this background coming through and giving it that kind of messiness and earthiness, really. And then just so you can see the connection here, this is just where it's just, you know, sort of big patterns connecting it, darker marks. And then this is actually the same time. I did this on the same occasion, and a lot of this twigginess and redness is all of the brambles that are existing and around, that are kind of scrambling and tumbling and meandering and kind of going over the walls and things. I'm quite interested in that way that is, because it looks on the one hand so moundy and so kind of round and voluptuous. On the other hand, you know, it's very prickly and stickly, and so I'm always quite fascinated by the brambles. And then this is some of the marks that you see in the landscape, some, you know, sort of just twigs sort of going off, and some dried fruits on them, you know, fruits that have kind of gone a bit sort of moribund. And then you've got the stone wall. So again, quite a sort of tangled mess. And this is an interesting one because I've kind of connected it with the green on this occasion. So that's the join. And this is this is the same occasion, but quite a long way up the path, this one. But I've connected it in through the green as though it's the same kind of piece. And then this is the last, let me just fold it over. This is the last one of three that I did when I was out and about. And the interesting thing here again is I'm really, again, fascinated by these greens that are such stark contrast to the muted tones. And this is all about walling and trees in the distance. But the other thing that this is about really is levels. And so you've got the green up there and the green down here, and it's sort of, that's how it kind of is, because there's a change in level and the walling retains it. So I was just kind of marking that out really in my mind. And lots of sort of twigginess again, the fencing and the barbed wire coming in as sort of very distinctive marks. And I was trying to sort of use much darker pieces here, and to a point this was the sort of like a version of that, a sort of a larger version of that background paper that was already on, but I've masked it off so that you see it quite differently. So that was another occasion. And then these last 3 pages, just to show that you can see the connection. I've not tried to make a connection. In a way, it's quite stark, because this is a sort of like could be a sort of a tree-like sort of structure. And actually, it was referencing a tree that was in the background. But this is a very different scene now. So I've gone from walking along a path with an edge on it to walking across a field here. So the green kind of comes through. So there's a connection there. But these last 3 are all walking across a field and the edges of actually gardens and fields. And so again, you've got this various types of walling. The sort of like, I like this sort of dotted, you know, sort of using the background to kind of connect pieces in. So here again, I'm not making an obvious connection, but there's certainly a connection through in the way the marks form. But again, I'm looking at the walling, I'm looking at the lines and edges, I'm looking at how the planting works in conjunction. So this is a sort of a tree in the background, and the sort of the way that the branches kind of come forward and go back, and some of it's foreground, some of it's background, just sort of playing around with that really, and here, and then knocking some of it back again with the white to create a bit more sort of breathing space and movability really. And then you've already seen how I've connected that in really, how this sort of goes through, but then I've whited off. And then this, again, is more sort of walling and different marks in the landscape, fences and distance marks, some quite sort of fun papers that were in the background, denoting this sort of walling and different sorts of marks, and again bringing white in. And actually variety is a spice of life, so whereas I've got these bigger sort of shapes here on whites and I've got the smaller ones, so I'm always trying to create this tension and this difference between different elements in terms of the size of the elements, in terms of the textures of the elements, in terms of the thickness of line and so on. They're not all the same, there's some difference, some are very straight, some are very wiggly, some have dots, so you kind of see the contrast in marks, the similarities and differences going through. And then finally, this last one, again, is quite nice because I've got the sort of dots that kind of connecting elements, so that I will show at the end it all outspread so you can see. But here, I was really fascinated by the way all of these different brambles again, but were coming forward down the wall. So I was facing a wall this time. I wasn't lurking along the edge of it. I was facing it. And all of these brambles were coming down and around, and different sort of winding manoeuvres, and I was able to use a sort of much more of a gestural approach to the mark making, and actually again blind contour. And then this is more of the twigginess that exists on the top of the wall and over the wall. You can't really see it, but you can kind of see the tops of all of the twigs. And here you can see how the inks have made a really nice sort of purpley muted haze, which actually is quite distinctive and quite much the colour of the time of year really. So that's really quite nice. And again, as I say, the marks. So hopefully that's useful, and I will now sort of show you the whole thing outstretched.